all sewn up and ready for a quick press. So as you go along through your sewing projects, keep things tidy by snipping off all those bits of thread at the end of your seams, and between each seam give your project a little press, or give your seam that you've just sewn a little press. Flip this over. We're still looking at the wrong side of the apron, but now we're going to do the hem. So I'm just going to press that up by 1 centimetre at the bottom, and then by 2 centimetres for the hem. Hems, I think, always look nicer and they're a little bit deeper than the rest. It's just a style decision. So just press that up there. My iron's still warming up again. And then press up again by 2 centimetres all the way along. And you can do it by eye, or you can use your tape measure. Good idea to just double check with your tape measure, or by folding your apron in half and checking that both sides have an equal depth hem, because you want your bottom of your apron to be nice and straight. Hold that iron in place there to set that crease. And once you're happy that that's all in the right place and looking nice and true and square, then you can pop your wonder clips in. And then can you guess what we're going to do next? Can you see a pattern emerging? We're just going to sew along that edge, and that will make the hem of our apron. And as you can see, it's really coming together now. I'm going to get on to some exciting bits in a minute. It really is a nice, easy project. There we go. So over to the machine and sew along there now. So I'm just going to carry on sewing all the way down that hem. If I'm ever lifting up the foot here, I'm just making sure that my needle is in the down position so I don't lose my position. And every now and then I lift it up just to smooth the fabric down. Coming towards the end. Back stitch to secure, and there we have it. So that's the hem done. We're now going to move on to the pocket, and I'm going to start off by creating the top edge of the pocket. So I'm just going to fold the fabric down by 1 centimetre at the top, and then by 2. You can do it by eye, or you can grab your tape measure, or if you've got a seam gauge, you can use that. I'm going to make it nice and even all the way along there. So I folded it over by 1 and then 2. A couple of the old wonder clips to hold that in place. I'm going to switch my machine over to red thread and sew all the way along there. The machine is threaded up with the red. I'm going to be looking at the back of the pocket, so I'm looking at my folded edge, and I'm just going to sew along that edge there. Nice easy straight seam. That's got folded back on itself in there. To the end, do a back stitch to secure those. There you go. So we're just going to give that a press, and then we're going to have some fun with an applique. again, I'll press those stitches that I've just made, that seam that I've just sewn, and then I'll flip my pocket over so I'm looking at the wrong side, and I'm just going to press in all the way around the edge by 1 centimetre. And this will just remind me or show me how big the pocket will be when it's finished. I'm not going to stitch it onto the apron just yet because we're going to do a fun applique on the pocket. And like I say, if you would rather do a pocket in the same fabric, you can just use your offcut. You should have just about enough. Or you can leave it without a pocket. You know, it's really up to you. And then you've got a nice little piece of red fabric to make something else with. So it's up to you. I'll just press that in by 1 centimetre all the way around. And when I'm now turning that over to the front, I'm looking at what will be the final size of my pocket once it's sewn on. Now I'm getting my spare piece of fabric and I'm looking at all the different houses I've got on here, and I'm going to choose this one. I think that's the prettiest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my fabric scissors and I'm just going to sort of rough cut around the edge like that. So I'm not cutting really neatly at this stage, and I'm going to take my heat and bond, and we can just press the heat and bond onto the back of that. So I'll make that slightly smaller again than the fabric. There we go. So that covers the back of the fabric, but it's just slightly smaller. Now your heat and bond has a sort of a rough gluey side and a papery side. What you want to do is you want to, I've cut out my house there, I want to turn that over, so I'm looking at the wrong side, and I want to take my heat and bond and I want to put that gluey side touching the wrong side, and I'm making sure that it's covering that house shape. And I'm just going to hold my iron over that, and I'm using a between wool and cotton setting, so it's a fairly hot iron, and I'm just going to hold that in place, and that will melt that gluey surface onto the back of my house, which I'm going to applique on. There we go. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm now going to cut around the edge of the house. It's easier to sort of applique, iron on a big square of this first and then cut round, rather than sort of cutting a very intricate shape, because then you have to then cut that intricate shape in the heat and bond. So it's best to sort of do it like this way. And try and keep your shape as simple as you can, because you're going to have to sew it on after all. So you don't want to make your job too hard for yourself once you're sewing it on. And I'm just leaving a little border of the natural round the outside edge as well. And then I can come over to the back and I can just peel off the paper section of that heat and bond. And I'm leaving behind on this side this gluey, in fact, I don't know if you can see it sort of shining in there, but that's going to now make it easier for me to glue on. So there's my pocket. Now, because I've pressed in the edges, I can now choose where I want my house to go, and I think I want to just sit happily in the corner there like that. It's up to you. You know, you could cut out a couple of houses. If you've got an embroidery machine or anything fancy like that, you could put a little initial there, or you could free motion stitch some smoke coming out of the chimney in a contrasting thread. No, literally this part is the creative part for you to just go crazy, depending on your skills and your equipment that you've got at your disposal. So there's my house that I've popped in the corner there. Now, because I've already pressed over this 1 centimetre, I can see exactly how it's going to look on the finished pocket. And I want to give myself a nice bit of space so that I can still stitch the pocket on, but I want her to sit in the corner there. So I'm happy with that position. That looks nice and straight to me, and I'm just going to put the iron on top there and that will melt that glue onto the pocket. And again, this is exactly the same for the adult apron, and the choice is yours, whether you do a plain red pocket and applique red pocket, or create a pocket in the same fabric again, or you know, or leave a, you know, don't have a pocket altogether. Some people just love pockets, some people are not such fans, so it's up to you. There we are, so that has now fixed this on there, it's glued on now. Can you see it won't sort of come off? So what I can do now is stitch around the edge of this house to applique it on. So I am going to now applique on my little house, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to do a zigzag stitch all the way around the edge. Now I've just had a little play around with my zigzag settings to get the correct stitch width and length that I want, and take a look at your sewing machine manual to find out how to do that. You'll either have a digital machine or a machine with dials that you have to fiddle around with. So I've set my machine onto the zigzag stitch, and I've then chosen a stitch width. So this is how wide this, you know, how wide they are at 4, and a stitch length of 0.8, which is just under 1 if you're using a dial, and that's how close and scrunched up they are together. So just grab yourself a scrap and have a little play around to get your correct settings, but if you want to copy me, I'm doing a width of 4 and a stitch length of 0.8. I'm then going to start off on a nice straight edge actually, so I'm going to start off on the straight edge of the house there. I'm not going to backstitch because that looks messy sometimes, and then I'm just going to position the edge of my applique there so that it's in the middle of my sewing machine foot, and then I'm just going to hand wind so that I can sort of see roughly where those stitches are falling, and then I can just move. Yeah, I'm happy there that those zigzags are just going to hug the edge. I can just see by looking at that needle that those zigzags are going to hug the edge there. So I'm ready to go. I'm taking it nice and slow, and I can just see that my zigzags are hugging around the edge of my gingerbread house, and I'm using the red thread. I've got a nice fully loaded bobbin, and I'm going to come all the way down to that end corner so that my needle, I'm hand winding that final stitch there so that my needle ends up right on that corner. And then I shall just hand wind those first couple of stitches. So when I come to a corner, I make sure that my needle is right on the corner, just here. Even if I have to stop it early and then hand wind the final stitches, I want to be right on the corner. And then with the needle down into my work, I lift my foot and pivot my fabric around the corner. And if you find this is a little bit beyond your skill set, that's no problem. You can just, because you've glued that house on with your heat and bond, you could just do a straight stitch if you would find that easier. Or you could just practice this on a scrap. So I'm nearing the end now. I'm just going to hand wind those final stitches so that I can see that when I come to pivot round, I'm right on the corner there. I don't know if you can see that. And round I come, and I just make sure that I'm right on the edge of the fabric again, and off I go. And again, hand wind that stitch down there into the corner of the triangle for the roof. And I want to be right on the top point of that roof turret. And round I go. There we go. And then I'm going to come back down there. I've given myself a little bit of extra work because I'm working on the chimney. You could make this easier on yourself by not cutting around the chimney, she says to herself. And off we go around here. Back down again. nearly at where I started, so I'm just going to carry on and go over my stitches. I'm not going to go over them by too much, but just sort of ending where I began. And I'm not going to back stitch, I'm going to pull the threads through to the back and tie them in a knot because that's a bit neater. So I give myself nice long thread tails to allow me to do that. And there's my house appliqued on there. So what we're going to do is I'll just pull those threads through to the back. Just get my glasses and my stitch picker out. And I'll just grab that thread. I think I can just see the loop there. Pull that through, and that's pulling that thread through from the front to the back of the pocket. And then I can just tie those in a little knot. That's one of them gone, I've got to the other one. And then you won't see anything from the front of your pocket there. Now I've got a trick for making sure that this is in the centre, and what I do is I take my pocket and I will just fold it in half. And give it a press. So you get a little crease down the centre there. And then I do the same on the apron. And to be honest with you, you might have a little bit of a crease down the centre there anyway. But this is just, you can do it by eye, but this is just a little help as well. So put a crease in the middle there and lay it back out in front of you, and you just need to match up those creases so you can kind of see that your pocket is nice and straight. And hopefully those folds, mine are coming a bit undone now, so you might want to just repress those if you're following along. And there you go, that's the pocket all nicely lined up on the front of the apron. So I need it probably to be a little bit higher, maybe that's a good position for it. And then I'm just going to pin that in place. And I'll just pin it in place and take a look, see if I'm happy with the position. And then once that's done, we can just sew the pocket onto the apron. Being careful not to pin your work to the actual ironing board cover. I'm just going to continue round adding pins. So I've pinned my pocket in place, and I'm now going to stitch my pocket onto my apron. And I'm going to do a little twin needle effect for this, which I think will look really, really nice. And it will also help to encase the raw edges that we have where we folded our fabric in. So we're going to start up at one corner, we're going to come down, we're going to go along, we're going to come back up to the top, and then we're going to stitch across 3 stitches, and then we're going to come down and along and back up again, and then come across 3 stitches here to meet back where we started. So that I can show you how this is going to look, I have been, as I'm making my children's apron, I've been also making my adult apron. So here it is. It's the same design exactly. Now you can hopefully see there that you're going to end up with these 2 parallel rows of stitching going all the way around that pocket. And that just helps to securely attach the pocket to your apron, and also on the inside your raw edges of them being sort of encased. So it gives a really nice neat finish. So pop that one out of the way for now. We'll go back to our children's apron, and we're just going to stitch that on. So being careful to make sure that my ties aren't getting in the way, I'm just going to put the edge of the pocket down, and this, you know, you haven't now got your needle plate as a guide, you're just going to do this using your eyes, and we're going to wind the needle down into the fabric, making sure that it's right in the top corner of that pocket where we want it to be. And then I'm going to do 3 stitches forward, or 2 or 3, and then a couple back to lock in our stitches. And then taking the pins out as I go, I'm just, oh, my machine went a bit funny there, thought it was going backwards still. Right, and then we're going to just carry on and stitch along this edge. So take it nice and slowly. I've got 2.8 as my stitch length. So when you're doing top stitches, a slightly longer stitch length is really attractive. So about 2.8 or 3 is a good stitch length for this. And when I get to that corner there, I'm right in the corner, needle down in the fabric, lift the presser foot and swivel around here and back down again. And if you prefer to do so, you can hand wind those final few stitches as you approach the corner. It makes it a bit easier to control. Sometimes the pedal control is a bit tricky if you're new to sewing. And some machines have speed dials on them as well that you can use. Taking the pins out as I go. Swivel around and making sure I'm not catching anything underneath. Nothing's getting folded under there. Right, so I'm going to go nice and slow as I get towards the top, and I just want to stop with my needle in the fabric just shy of the top edge of my pocket there. And I'm going to now do my twin needle effect. So I swivel this round, foot back down, and I'm just going to hand wind 1, 2, 3. I'm going to swivel back round. And now roughly speaking, my first line of stitching should line up with that edge of my presser foot now. So I'm just going to use that as a guide to keep my stitches parallel. So I'm just looking here, my eye is here, looking to see that this stitch line is against the edge of the presser foot. And I'm just going to do a bit of judgment work. I think that's about right. Let's see, swivel it round. Could do with one more stitch, swivel it back, hand crank 1 stitch. There you go, right on it. As I come up to the corner, I'm just going to take it nice and slow. Just hand wind 1 there, let's see. It's perfect, spot on. I've done this before. All the way back up to the top. And then just shy of the top edge of that fabric, we're going to come back round and just hand wind those 1, 2, 3 back to where we started, and then you can just, to lock your stitches, come back down and stitch back over where you started to lock them in. So I hope that was easy to follow, because you do get a rather nice twin needle effect, nice and even all the way round. And I think that makes a really cute pocket. So I'm now going to trim off these threads and we'll go on to doing the necktie.